An alcoholic walks into a bar. He walks out to a beautiful lady and he says, "Hey baby, do I come here often?" No, that was rubbish. Okay, let me think of a better one, hang on. Okay, a screwdriver walks into a bar and the barman says, "Hey, I make a drink named after you." And the screwdriver says, "You make a drink named Philip?" Do, pa! Yeah, okay, that one's better. Go with that one, forget the first one. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. So, a quick disclaimer up front today. Everything you're about to hear is opinion rather than fact. It is all hypothetical. We're going to be talking about banning alcohol, and I don't think really anybody is calling for that right now. But it appears in my comments quite a lot. In fact, I've said it myself. I think alcohol should be banned. Today, we're going to interrogate that. As I said, this is opinion. And I may have got myself sober, but I am still an idiot quite a lot of the time. I may have made huge improvements in my life, but I am quite often very stupid. That's not the disclaimer. What I'm saying is that everything you're about to hear is opinion and is therefore liable to be wrong, and you are welcome to challenge it. I want to be challenged on this stuff. So while I am weighing up the pros and cons of banning alcohol, I'd like to know if you have an opinion either way. If you feel strongly in any particular direction, let me know in the comments. And then subscribe if you like this kind of laid back ASMR style sober content. Sober content to fall asleep to, as I like to call it. Let me state my case. I frankly cannot believe that alcohol is legal. I think a genuine case can be made that alcohol is the worst thing that we've ever invented. Worse than nuclear weapons, worse than plastic, worse than landmines and chemical warfare, maybe even worse than social media algorithms. We'll have to wait and see about that last one, won't we? The unmatched power alcohol has to ruin lives and kill people should automatically make it illegal to produce or to consume. And every single alcohol marketer should be sent to a secret prison in the Gobi Desert. And yet, here we are. Alcohol is very much legal, and alcohol CEOs are very rich. And it's not just legal, it's openly advertised, widely available, even socially encouraged, in my opinion. And remember, this is the opinion of an alcoholic, so perhaps a little bit of bias involved. I think it is objectively true that the world would be a better place without alcohol. I don't even feel like I need to justify that. I think it is self-evidently true. But does that mean it should be banned? Maybe not. We used to do this exercise in debate class in which you were given an opinion or a position that was specifically against your own principles, and you had to defend that opinion and win the debate, even though the position that you were assuming, the position that you'd been given, was against your own personal values. Really, it's a test of rhetorical technique and persuasiveness, but it was a very useful exercise because it allows you to construct persuasive arguments about things in which you don't necessarily believe. And it's a useful exercise, and that's what I'm going to do today. Since I am pretty demonstrably, pretty obviously anti-alcohol, and I am a recovering alcoholic, and given the tone, the normal tone of this channel, which tends to be quite dark and tends to explore the destruction and the depths of an alcohol use disorder, my own, it might be weird for you to hear that I do not think that alcohol should be banned. You would be forgiven for expecting someone like me to be campaigning against the availability of alcohol. But that's not the case, and I didn't know it was the case until I sat down to start putting this video together. And you might kind of see me come to a conclusion as we go through it. So instead of making the case for why alcohol should be banned, today I'm going to make the case for why it should be legal. Pull up a chair, grab a cheese, let's talk about it. First of all, why alcohol should not be banned. Public health. Alcohol has several health benefits. There is evidence to suggest that in moderate quantities, some types of alcohol actually improve. No, I'm lying to you, alcohol is fucking terrible for you. It is literally poison. There are no health benefits to alcohol whatsoever. Don't believe the morning TV segments that cheerfully claim a new study has revealed that a glass of wine per day is good for your heart. Those studies are paid for, they're financed by the alcohol industry. That is not a conspiracy theory, that is PR. But that said, there really is a kind of perverse health benefit of keeping alcohol legal. And that's that the legality of alcohol helps to stave off the taboo and the stigma of seeking treatment for addiction to it. Now that might seem like a rubbish reason to keep it legal. Saying that because it exists you can get treatment for being addicted to it seems slightly tautologous. But I can explain. If alcohol was banned, it wouldn't stop existing, right? It's almost irresponsible, I think, to believe that banning alcohol would be the end of the problem. It won't. It would just go underground, making treatment of alcohol-related health issues much more difficult. And just while I'm making that point, because it is cogent, sex worker rights are human rights. At least alcohol has the benefit of being able to be treated openly. There are rehabilitation and treatment programs publicly available, and they are preferable to the criminal punishment that a lot of addicts of other chemicals are likely to receive. The medical treatment that alcoholics receive is not good, usually. But at least we can get it. But at least we can walk into a place and the doctors don't suspect us of trying to steal from them. And I don't think we should mess with that format. As recovering alcoholics, it would be dangerous to enforce a ban that affects people who are still drinking when we are not. Imagine the damage I could do to people who are currently still drinking and trying to get sober by campaigning for it to be illegal to drink. I would take all of the goodness that I've received in sobriety, and instead of using it to help people who are still struggling, I would be using it to punish them. And also, even in long-term sobriety, we are prone to relapse. If we got sober when alcohol was legal, and then relapsed when it was banned, I imagine the consequences for us would be much, much worse. And similarly, a ban would just encourage an industry of illicit and unregulated alcohol production. We've seen it before. I actually had fake alcohol once. I drank fake alcohol in Shanghai at a place called the Park Tavern in Shujiahui. It was one of the worst nights of my entire life before the alcohol really got on top of me. And that little split, there was a lot of it in Shanghai at that time, and it made the local news, and it emerged that the people making it had been using formaldehyde as a preservative. And I can assure you, a formaldehyde hangover is no joke. I mean, that shit will kill you real fast. Real fast. So, at least while it's legal, alcohol is unlikely to be made in a lead bathtub in an abandoned house and full of embalming fluid and asbestos and paint thinner and stuff. Keeping it legal gives us some measure of safety. I mean, alcohol is a toxic poison, but it could be worse. And therefore, while anyone who tries to convince me that alcohol is good for your health will receive a very robust punch in the face, I do believe that while it does exist, there are some social benefits to maintaining its legality. The next, society and culture. So, what about the socio-cultural impact of banning alcohol? Is there any? And what is it? For better or worse, in my opinion, worse, alcohol is deeply ingrained in most of our cultures. Christianity, Judaism, some sects of Hinduism, Shinto, and many traditional African religions all use alcohol ritualistically, in one way or another. Alcohol is prohibited in Jainism, Sikhism, Buddhism, and Islam. But even in Islamic countries, the enforcement can be patchy. It's often not dogmatically enforced. I was in a restaurant in Kyrgyzstan a few years ago, drinking a beer, before I got sober, drinking a beer, and it was a very busy kind of restaurant area. And Kyrgyzstan is an Islamic country in name. And when the call to prayer sounded, the evening call to prayer, everybody just stopped drinking and bowed their heads. And then when the call to prayer finished, they didn't go to the mosque, they just carried on drinking. And that happened in Xinjiang in China as well, I saw that. And if you've heard that places like Dubai and Saudi Arabia are completely dry countries, I can assure you they are not. In fact, just a quick tangent, I used to know a woman who her job essentially was to smuggle sex toys into Saudi Arabia. She used to, you know those massive electric pepper grinders, about the size of table legs? She used to put them inside those so that the X-ray machines at the customs in Saudi Arabia wouldn't be able to identify them very, very well. It's an amazing strategy. True story. She was very brave. To remove alcohol entirely, to ban it all, everywhere, all at once, and to prevent religious cultures from practicing with alcohol would certainly cause huge, widespread civil unrest. And we have plenty of precedent for that. Alcohol, specifically red wine, is part of the Eucharist, of taking communion. Now, if you can find a single Catholic who can give me a clear answer on transubstantiation, then you can keep the wine. That's the end of the conversation. If you can get that answered for me, is the wine the blood of Christ or is it not? And if it is it literally the blood of Christ? Did it change in the glass? Was it the blood of Christ when it was in the box? At what point did it become the blood of Christ? I've drunk a lot of communion wine, and it is indistinguishable from the kind of kitchen box wine that we used to use in cooking when I was working in disgusting cheap kitchens in France. But wine being the blood of Christ is so intrinsic to Catholic ritualism that removing it, banning alcohol, is just not really feasible. But it matters so much to Catholics that there is precedent for this. So when the Anabaptists took over the city of Munster, they were strict kind of asceticists, I suppose. Very simple lives, and the Anabaptists didn't drink. And they took over control of Munster in Germany and banned the use of wine, alcohol, in the service. And the Catholics eventually killed them all in extremely horrible and nasty and torturous ways. It wasn't just because of that. There was also the whole forced polygamy and, property confiscation and all of that. That's what led to the Catholics killing all of the Anabaptists. But the communion wine was important enough that it was a feature in the war that broke out. And there were appeals to the Pope about it and interventions from political bodies and that kind of thing. The Anabaptists were ultimately forced to allow the Catholics to practice with wine. The Catholics, without the wine, complained that they were living in sin. So that might mean an outright ban on alcohol might have to include exemptions for religious purposes, just as it did at the beginning of Prohibition. And how's Prohibition going? Oh. Speaking of, we tried banning it already, and it didn't really work. In fact, the temperance movement in Europe and prohibition in the US was a terrible disaster by virtually any measure. It led directly to the rise of organised crime as we would recognise it today. Again, banning the alcohol doesn't stop it from existing, it just drove it underground, and in fact, therefore, increased its value. Here's an interesting thing though. The majority of the population of the US were in favour of prohibition to start with. 80% of state legislators were in favour of it. 76% of senators and 68% of the House of Representatives were all in favour of prohibition, which indicates that there was wide public support. The large American Protestant movements, which didn't practice the Eucharist, they were in favour. Female suffragists mobilised in an effort to protect traditional family values from the destruction of alcoholic husbands, they were in favour. And industrialists, wealthy businessmen, wanted a more efficient workforce and were also in favour of prohibition. But in practice, it turned out to be impossible to enforce. It did lasting economic damage. Alcohol was the 5th largest industry at the time, and it was a contributing factor, one of many millions of contributing factors to the Great Depression. It doesn't really surprise me that America started drinking again during the Great Depression. Those two things are kind of comorbid, aren't they? But today, there is no real temperance or prohibition movement, not really. It's difficult to get people... There's no demand for a ban right now, despite the damage that it does, despite the way it kills people horribly and ruins the lives of everybody around them. There is no real awareness that a ban is an option. And that's because it's impossible to make most people believe that there's a serious problem with alcohol, because most people don't have a serious problem with alcohol. The point is of that section that we did ban it. We have banned it in the past, and it made everything worse, as alcohol tends to do. And now the big one. The personal freedom to do stupid and unhealthy things. This one, I think, is extremely important, and for me is the most persuasive, because I believe this stuff in my bones. As idealistic as it might sound, I believe that personal choice, that is agency over one's own decisions, is one of the most important parts of our identity. We are defined by the decisions that we make, and we have to be free to make them. Mark Twain said, "Censorship is telling a man he can't have a steak because a baby can't chew it." And that's me. I am the baby in that equation. And just because I can't drink, who the fuck am I to tell everyone else that they can't drink? Being stupid and making bad and unhealthy and risky decisions should not be a crime. We would all be in prison forever, everyone. See you there. And no government should have the power to legislate over our bodies. We should get to choose what we put in and what we don't put into our big, stupid, soft human bodies. This is all we've got, and that's a right worth defending. And unfortunately, it means also defending a person's right to make bad decisions. to do bad and stupid things to their body. We don't get to just defend the good decisions. We have to also defend the bad ones. And one of the bad ones, I think, is drinking alcohol in any volume at all. And that's because the right to choose, that is, the right to have agency over our own bodies, to have body autonomy, is the watermark of a healthy and free society. That means you are rightly free to do with your body whatever you choose, just as we are free to punish you if what you do with your body harms somebody else. That's the trade. You can do whatever you want with your body as long as it doesn't harm anybody else. That is essentially the loose social agreement we have on any number of things. For the most part, that social agreement works. We stray into strange territory here, in which I find myself talking about government overreach, and that hardly feels relevant, except we are talking about free will and personal choice, so we have no choice but to explore it just for a moment. Government overreach is not just an American problem, it is absolutely a global problem. Government overreach is something that needs to be resisted everywhere. I spent time in Germany and France, which have very progressive attitudes towards personal freedoms. I've also travelled extensively in China and Belarus and Russia, where the governments are much more restrictive about personal freedoms. And on balance, while alcoholism is a problem that transcends political systems, I would rather have it in a place that values personal freedom. If I'm going to be an alcoholic, I would prefer to do it in a system that values personal liberty. In fact, government overreach, like left-wing or right-wing governments, fascistic governments versus progressive liberal governments, there's no correlation between left and right or alcohol dependence and sobriety on a society-wide basis. After all, Hitler, who was not exactly known for his progressive social attitudes, was sober, while Churchill, defending liberty and the free world, was an alcoholic. But my point is that if you're going to be an alcoholic anywhere, it's best to do it. It's better to do it in a slightly more liberal government, because restrictive, totalitarian or dictatorial governments don't tend to devote much resource either to public health in general and specifically to recovery from addiction. Is that my point? I don't know. I feel like I've garbled something. Can someone finish this point for me in the comments, because I've lost my way. But it is related to the point about government overreach. For example, I would point out that in a lot of places in Europe and a lot of places in the US, it's currently legal to smoke weed. You won't face any punishment. But if you do that in a place like Thailand or Malaysia, they'll kill you for it. They will kill you for something that is legal in your country. And there are powerful politicians in the US right now who have openly stated that they would make drug dealing a capital offence. So, would you be willing to expand that power, capital punishment, to alcohol? By making it illegal, by banning alcohol, you potentially put an alcohol drinker on death row. I wouldn't. I don't want that on my conscience. Enough people die from addiction every year without the government lending a helping hand. What matters is that we have jurisdiction over our own bodies and that we resist legislation of any kind over them. But to do that, and to be consistent with those values, we also have to protect people's right to do things to their bodies that are potentially destructive, harmful. People need that freedom too, I believe. That's the nature of free will. It's in society's benefit to help the people who make bad decisions for their bodies, not punish them. Look, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, alcoholism is my problem. It's also society's problem, and it's also alcohol's problem. But most people in society do not have an alcohol problem. I am in the minority, so the problem is with me and not with everyone else out there. And even though I am absolutely convinced that the world would be a better place without alcohol, the idea of a ban almost feels worse to me. Because at least while it's legal, we can help each other openly. So let's talk about it. If you have an equal but opposite view about the banning of alcohol, if you are convinced that it should be, and you can explain why, please do so in the comments. As I said at the start, this is all opinion, and I am occasionally very stupid, and I may well have overlooked some very simple arguments, and I'd like to hear yours. I'd really love to hear it, and I mean that. I'm not just talking. I'd like to be corrected. I like to be confronted when I'm wrong. Thank you for watching opinions fall out of my mouth for the last half an hour or so. I do appreciate it. And as always, good luck out there.